What's happening, y'all? We're back for another book review on the channel. Today we got the first book on my December TBR, and it's a book to get me in the holiday spirit. And as far as I know, as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the rare holiday horror novels, and that book is Mr. Joe Hill's NOS4A2. So let's jump into the plot. So what we got today is a story about a young girl with remarkable talent by the name of Vic McQueen. So this remarkable talent she has is that with the help of her bike, she is able to travel across a bridge, a covered bridge known as the Shorterway Bridge, and find exactly what she needs, whether that is a lost picture, lost bracelet, or even trouble. So one day Vic goes looking for trouble after a series of events, and the trouble she finds is a man by the name of Charlie Manx. So Charlie Manx is someone who also has a special talent. So with the help of his Rolls-Royce Wraith, a 1938 model, he's able to travel into his own twisted imagination and take children to a place he calls Christmas Land, where they'll never be unhappy. Well, Vic escapes Charlie. She's the only one to ever escape Mr. Manx, and Charlie Manx doesn't take too kindly to that. So after years, Vic's all grown up now, and Charlie Manx still hasn't stopped thinking about old Victoria McQueen. And when Mr. Manx re-enters the scene, Vic is left with one option, and that is to kill Manx or die trying. And that's where the story goes. So, I will say, before we move any further, this book is a wild concept, pretty engrossing story, but beware of a few minor spoilers ahead. So, let's get right into the cons. And this book, I'd say only really for me personally, had two cons. The first of which is that if this book were a 10-ounce steak, there's probably 2 to 3 ounces of fat. There's quite a bit in this. Clocks in just under 700 pages, and in my opinion at least, 200 pages at least could have been cut out of this book, and I would have lost nothing from my reading experience. There's some arcs, like miniature arcs, and some characters and scenes that I don't feel like really add much to the story. They just kind of happen. But like I said, that could just be me, and it could be a result of my second con for this book, which is the cast of characters. So the majority, I will say, with the exception of 3, which I'll get into in the pros, most of the characters in this book I found were blah, just kind of eh. So like Hutter and Daltrey, the cops, they had no impact on me. Lou Carmody, I think that's how you say his name, if I remember right, had no impact on me, and which is not good because he's probably has a pretty big role as Wayne's father and as Vic's partner. He's in it a lot, and his whole arc with his heart and everything, like it felt kind of just added and like fat that could have been trimmed. And like I said, Vic's parents they kind of just passed me by. Maggie, as much as I wanted to like Maggie, I couldn't. And last but not least, Wayne, which is my biggest issue. I felt no emotional connection to Wayne. I felt like, for the most part, he was low impact in the book. I feel like he was just kind of a product of the situation. Well, and I should say that Wayne is Vic's and Lou's son. And like I said, he just felt like a product of the story. And it didn't add up to much for me. I'd say he's one of the 4 main characters in this book to me. And looking over his shoulder, I was just kind of like, come on, let's get through this. Like, there's some cool sequences, and luckily the sequences involve other characters, so I didn't mind reading them. But had they not involved the other 2 characters as much, then I would have had a lot more problems with it. But like I said, that's the biggest thing for me, was the characters. Like I said, there's 3 characters though that are core to the story that I'm going to get into in my prose, which will be in just a moment. So, like I said, let's start with the prose. So, the first of the prose, I would say there's two like creative decisions with this book that I found awesome, in my opinion. Like, they were just like unique ones that I don't get to see much in this like type of book, or I should say just in like adult literature and stuff like this. So the first of which is the illustrations. And there's one specific example that springs to mind, and that is Bing, who is Charlie Manx's assistant, his partner in crime, apprentice, whatever you want to call him. It's when he discovers Christmas Land. So he is reading like this porno mag, and he's going through the ads in the back, and he finds the ad for Christmas Land, and they show the ad that is like in this magazine, and for some reason that just stuck with me and like creeped me out. Like, I don't know, there was something about just looking at the ad that made me like, ugh. Yeah, I don't know. And there's just other little illustrations in this book that really like help to kind of deepen that immersion and whatnot. And the other creative choice that Joe Hill made is that he, like, when he's writing certain chapters, especially like really intense scenes, so if there's like a chase scene or a fight scene or anything like that, and it moves location, he will like, it writes straight through the chapters. So a lot of the time what you'll have is like the sentence at the end of the chapter will just be cut off mid-sentence, and it will pick right back up in the next chapter. And it's such a smooth transition, and especially in like parts, in those like really intense parts in the book, it just like you're literally like flipping the pages as quick as you can to get through, because they're so intense. And those hard cuts like that just were, I thought personally, it was an excellent one. And it really deepened my experience with this book for some reason. I don't know why, but it did. All right, the next pro is that although it is a lengthy book, it's like I said, 700 pages, it reads quick. Like, I burned through this thing. Like, it doesn't feel like it takes long, because I think Hill did such a great job pacing it. So like, it starts out kind of slow, you have to understand some of these broad concepts, which like inscapes, which I'll get into in just a second. But so like he kind of builds this foundation, and then he just ramps it up, and it just keeps ramping, and it ramps until the climax, and the climax just kind of smooths out into that falling action and resolution, and it's just so nice, so well paced, and it reads very fast, at least to me. And like I said, inscapes, another huge pro to this book, because the concept, for me, I don't know why, like conceptually thinking about these things always excites me. So if a book has a good hook, like a good concept, like inscapes, which are the unique powers and like abilities that a few people have in the book, then that always is gonna like just sink its claws into me and make me that much more interested in reading the book. So inscapes are these abilities that people use, like, so instead of trying to escape a situation, instead they inscape, and they use these abilities to get out of a troubling situation. So there's 3 instances of these inscapes, and that's Vic and her bike, which she uses to travel to other places and find things. Manx uses his wraith to take people to Christmas Land for a reason that I'm not going to get into, because I'd say it's a little more revealing than it should be for me to talk about right here, because I want you to read this book. And lastly is Maggie and her Scrabble tiles, which she's able to pull out and talk and get answers to things. But the best part about these inscapes is that each come with a cost for using them. So each one has their reasons like that you would use them, but like I said, I'll talk about Maggie's, and I won't talk about the others two, because I feel like they reveal a lot that is kind of spread throughout this story. But for Maggie, when she uses her Scrabble tiles, it increases her stutter. So the more she uses them, the more she wants to find out, the more answers she gets, the harder is it it is for her to communicate these answers, because her stutter and her stammer become so profound, which I thought was such a neat concept, to have these really cool abilities, but for them to draw back and have permanent drawbacks, not just like in an instant, but like significant lasting effects for using them. And that's just something that I hope I get to see more of in Hill's other works and stuff like that. So I really like that concept of Enscapes. Another big pro for me is references. When a book can reference a real world thing and can anchor that into reality, for me, it leaps and bounds for this book. It pushes it that much more forward in my thinking and in my enjoyment of the book. One specific instance, so it's set in like the late 80s, I believe, when Vic is a child. So there's a scene where she's going by a car, and it just gives, like, she hears the song that's playing in the car that goes by, and it's Abracadabra. And it's just a snippet of the lyrics. And that just little reference to give you kind of a sense of time, if you know that era of music, was enough to just be like, dang, like I know exactly when this is now. Like I know like what to expect in every other regard, just in that like whole setting. And for those who don't know, Hill is the son of Stephen King. So he references Stephen King's multiverse in this. So there's a reference to Pennywise from It, and there's a reference to the True Knot from Dr. Sleep, along with a ton of other references to real life things and other Stephen King multiverse things that I just missed because I'm not that well versed. But when a book can reference real things, it just takes it up another level for me. And the last pro, and in my opinion the biggest pro, and one of the reasons you should read this book, is that the three characters that the book spends the majority of the time with are excellent and so fleshed out and so interesting. And that's Vic McQueen, that is Mr. Charlie Manx, and Bing. So let's start with Bing. Bing is, for lack of a better word, fucking crazy. He really is. Like, he's genuinely just a psychopath. And it's always so fun to me to read like the thoughts of a psychopath like that, because like I said, he's Manx's assistant and he's just wild. Like, he's, some of the things he says and some of like the thoughts that he has, it's just mind-boggling and disturbing. It's like when there's certain scenes that Bing is on the page, it's like a train wreck. Like, you don't want to look, but you can't help it. Like, you just have to see it. And like I said, reading his parts were just like, you just had to read them, because there was times I like had like a visceral reaction where I'd be like, I'd read a sentence or something he'd say, and my head would snap back. I'm like, ugh, like you're just a physical reaction to reading him. It was so fun when he's on the page. Next we have Vic McQueen. And I think I connected with Vic McQueen because it's one of my favorite character like archetypes, you could say. And that is the failed mother. For some reason, that's an archetype that I love. And I love her arc with, as a child, she remembers these things. But as she grows up, she's like, that was just my imagination. She starts to believe she's crazy. She falls in and she has some addiction issues with alcohol and stuff. And like, just her whole arc of trying to reconcile that what did happen to her was just fake when she was a kid, and that the Shorter Way Bridge was just not real, and that it was just her own mind. And just to hear her talk and her self-dialogue is just so exciting, and she fits one of my favorite archetypes. I won't say my favorite, but one of my favorite archetypes of a character is the failed mother. So I really loved Vic, and I'm glad that we spend most of the story over her shoulder. And lastly is Charlie Manx, our book's villain and main antagonist, who is such a mysterious character. I love that you don't really get to find a whole lot out about Charlie and stuff, and that you can't really trust what he's saying, because there's always subtext when he talks, and he's like this old-timey character that like, he says he's like 116, but you really don't know how old he is, because you can't really trust what he's saying. because obviously he's always got some kind of motivation and ill intentions hidden behind these things. Also, I like that he justifies taking kids to Christmas Land, and that there's a reason. He's not just some evil psychopath who's like a pedophile. Like, it's not like that. It's like he's trying, like he tries to justify it and say that the parents are wrong and they're raising these kids and they're going to end up horrible because of that. And he's like trying to help these kids, and like his justification and how he like manipulates people like Bing. And it's just, there's a lot to him, and he's a really interesting character. Obviously, you know, he's the bad guy from the start of the book, but he's definitely got some layers and a lot of mystery surrounding him, which is really fun to read in my opinion. So, like I said, all in all, NOS4A2 is a read for this holiday season. Hope you can pick it up, check it out before Christmas time. And like I said, it's fast-paced. Although it is a big book, it reads quick. It's not something you got to put a ton of thought into, but I feel like there's layers there if you want to dive deeper into those and kind of try to look for those references and stuff. But like I said, definitely a great jumping in point if you're interested in Joe Hill and horror and those type of writing styles and stuff. So like I said, check it out. And until next time, stay reading, y'all.